At 12:40 in the morning, I was standing in my husband's office in my socks, turning off a desk lamp he'd left on, thinking about nothing more serious than getting back to bed. Richard had left for the airport a few minutes earlier. He'd kissed my forehead the way he always did when he was rushing, said, "I love you," and walked out with his suitcase and laptop bag. The door clicked shut. The apartment went quiet again. I was reaching for a stack of papers to straighten them when I saw his wallet half hidden under a folder, brown leather, slightly scuffed at the edges. The kind of thing you don't notice until you need it. I picked it up and opened it once just to be sure. His ID was there. Credit cards, cash, everything. For a second I simply stood still with it in my hands, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator down the hall and the distant sound of an elevator moving somewhere in the building. I checked the clock on the wall. 12:40. His flight was at 3 a.m. If I moved quickly, I could still get it to him. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I sent a message. "You forgot your wallet. I'm bringing it to the airport. Meet me near departures." It sat there with one check mark, like it was waiting on permission to exist. I didn't drive well at night. Headlights make me dizzy, and I've never trusted myself on the highway after midnight. Our driver was gone for the evening, so I did what I'd done 100 times in daylight without thinking. I opened a ride app and ordered a car. While I waited, I put on a jacket over my pajamas and wrapped a scarf around my hair. I slid Richard's wallet into my purse like it was fragile. Then I stood by the front door and watched the little icon on my phone inch toward our building. When the intercom buzzed, I took a breath and went downstairs. Outside, Chicago was damp and cold in that late spring way that feels more like early spring. The streetlights made the sidewalk look orange. The road was mostly empty, the kind of quiet you only get when most people are asleep and the city is pretending it isn't a city. A black car was waiting at the curb. I opened the back door and got in. The interior was clean and smelled faintly like lavender air freshener. The driver didn't greet me with the bright voice some drivers use. He just nodded once, eyes forward. "Airport, domestic terminal," I said. "It's urgent." Another nod. He pulled away from the curb without wasting time. For a few minutes the ride felt ordinary. The tires made a soft hiss on wet asphalt. The heater blew gently at my feet. I watched the buildings slide by and tried to calm the tight feeling in my chest. Then I noticed the mirrors. The driver kept looking up, not quick glances the way people check traffic, but longer looks like he was watching for a specific car. His shoulders were set. His hands stayed fixed on the wheel, not relaxed. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was tired. Maybe the city made him cautious at night. I held my phone in my lap anyway and kept my thumb near the app's emergency button without tapping it. I tried calling Richard one more time. Voicemail again. My message still hadn't delivered. I put the phone face down for a moment and watched the reflections in the window. Streetlights, dark storefronts, the occasional pair of headlights passing in the opposite lane. The highway was unusually empty for a Thursday night. That should have made me feel safer. Instead, the quiet made every small thing stand out. The driver's steady breathing, the faint click when he adjusted his grip, the way he checked the rearview mirror again and again. "Is everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He didn't answer right away. He changed lanes smoothly, then glanced up again. "Just checking," he said, low and tired. "Traffic." There was almost no traffic. We drove on. The airport glow appeared ahead, an artificial brightness against a black sky. Normally, seeing that would have been a relief. It meant the trip was almost over. It meant lights, people, security, movement. I shifted in my seat and reached into my purse, touching the wallet through the fabric, like I needed the reminder of why I was there. I told myself I would hand it to Richard, watch him exhale with relief, and come straight home. As we got closer, the driver's focus didn't ease. If anything, it sharpened. He kept checking his mirrors, and now I could see a thin sheen of sweat along his temple, even with the air on. We passed a sign for the main departures roadway, but instead of following the flow toward the bright, busy lanes, he guided the car toward a darker side route where the lights were spaced farther apart and the pavement looked almost black. I sat up a little straighter. "Domestic departures is that way," I said, still calm, but more alert now. "I know," he replied, and he didn't turn. I looked out at the terminal lights drifting to my left, getting farther away instead of closer, and I set my phone back in my hand, screen awake, as the car continued into the dimmer stretch of road. He kept driving toward the side area like he hadn't heard me. At first I assumed there was a detour. Airports change traffic patterns all the time. Cones go up, lanes close, a sign appears overnight. But there were no cones, no flashing arrows, no workers, just patches of light and then long stretches of dark. I looked at the road ahead and then back toward the main terminal glow, which was now behind us. The farther we went, the quieter it felt. Even the usual airport noise seemed muted here, like we'd slipped behind the building into a place the public wasn't meant to linger. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't want to escalate anything. I just said it again, a little more clearly. "This isn't the drop-off." The driver's shoulders tightened. He didn't look back at me. "I know what I'm doing," he said. That wasn't reassuring. My phone was in my hand, unlocked. I could see the little emergency icon in the corner of the app. My thumb hovered over it without pressing. I could hear my own breathing, steady but shallow, and the soft whir of the car's vents. The car slowed near a less-used curb. There were a few streetlights, but some looked dim or half-working. The pavement was wet and dark. Concrete pillars held up an overhead structure. There were no security guards in view, no other cars in motion, just a couple parked far off, lights off. He came to a stop. I didn't wait. I reached for the door handle and pulled. Nothing. I pulled again, harder, like maybe I hadn't pulled far enough. The handle moved, but the door didn't open. I tried the other side, stretching across the seat, and it was the same. Locked. For a moment, my brain did that strange thing where it refuses to accept what's happening, like it had to replay the sequence to make it real. Car stops. Hand pulls handle, door stays shut. That meant a decision had been made, and it wasn't mine. "Why are the doors locked?" My voice came out thin but controlled. "Open them." He still didn't turn around. Both hands stayed on the wheel. His eyes were fixed forward, scanning the dark space beyond the curb, like he was waiting for something to move. "Don't get out of the car," he said, low and urgent. "Trust me." That line landed wrong in my chest. Trust me. From a stranger. At almost 2 a.m, in a place with no people. I felt the first real wave of panic, but I kept my body still. I'd learned over the years that panic makes you loud and sloppy. Loud and sloppy gets you hurt. I held my phone up. "I'm calling the police." "Listen," he said, and finally he turned his head just enough for me to see his eyes in the rearview mirror. They weren't cold. They were scared. Not a performance kind of fear. Something more raw, like his nerves were stretched tight and he was trying not to snap. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, "but if you get out right now, something bad is going to happen to you." I stared at him. The words didn't fit the situation, and that made them worse. I kept my finger near the emergency button but didn't press yet. I wanted one more piece of information before I did anything that couldn't be undone. "Why would something happen to me?" I asked. "You'll know in 5 minutes," he said, facing forward again. "Just 5. 5 minutes can be nothing. 5 minutes can also be forever." I looked out the window. The glass reflected my own face back at me. Pale, eyes wide, scarf wrapped tight. Beyond the reflection, the space outside was mostly empty: a concrete pillar, a dark strip of pavement, a corner where shadows gathered. I tried to see if anyone was there. I couldn't. My purse was on the seat beside me. Somewhere inside it, buried under my wallet and a pack of tissues and a lip balm I never used, was the pepper spray I carried out of habit. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. If I started digging, my movements would get frantic, and he might react to that. Instead, I did something small and deliberate. I texted my friend Mia, the one person who was awake at odd hours. In a rideshare, driver took wrong route near airport, doors locked. If I don't text in 10 minutes, call 911. I hit send and watched it go through. Then I put the phone face down on my lap and forced myself to breathe slowly. The driver's hands were still tight on the wheel. His jaw moved once like he was grinding his teeth. He kept looking up at the rearview mirror, then back toward the pillar area, then up again. After a few seconds, he spoke without turning around. "Do you work late sometimes?" he asked, as if we were making normal conversation. The question was so out of place that it chilled me. "No," I said. "I work from home." He nodded once, almost to himself. "Okay." Then he went quiet again. I watched the dashboard clock. It was close to 2 a.m. The seconds ticked forward in clean little jumps that felt too loud for the stillness around us. I tried one more time, calmly. "Tell me what's going on." There was a pause. I heard him inhale. Then he said, "I know your dad." My stomach dropped as if the car had moved. "My dad died 3 years ago," I said, careful and slow. "I know," he replied. "I worked for him." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I waited for him to prove he wasn't guessing. He swallowed. "James," he said, like offering a key. I was head of his personal security. The name hit me in a strange way, familiar but distant, like something I'd forgotten on purpose. I saw a quick flash in my mind of my father at an event, people shaking his hand, and a man standing a few steps behind him, quiet, watchful. I leaned forward slightly. "James," I repeated. He nodded. "Before your dad passed, he asked me to keep an eye on you. Not in your life, not in your business, just watch from a distance." I stared past him to the dark road ahead, trying to fit this explanation into reality. "And you're driving for a rideshare app now?" I asked. His mouth tightened. "Not usually." I let that hang there. My mind started arranging facts like pieces on a table: the locked doors, the detour, the fear in his eyes, the obsession with the mirrors. "Why tonight?" I asked. He glanced up at the rearview mirror again. "Because I got information earlier today. Something was planned." I felt my throat tighten. "Planned by who?" He didn't answer directly. He said, "You were going to be taken." I didn't react outwardly. Inside, something cold spread through me. "Taken where?" I asked. He exhaled hard through his nose. "I don't know where. I just know the plan was to grab you fast, drug you, get you out before anyone noticed." I held still, letting the words settle. They sounded like a nightmare, but they were said in a tired, practical tone. Not dramatic, not theatrical, like he was describing a job that had to be done. "And you expect me to believe that?" I asked. He looked at the clock. 2 minutes, he said quietly. 2 minutes for what? I tightened my grip on my phone. I didn't press anything yet. I was listening, the way you listen when you're standing on the edge of something and you need to know which direction is safer. "I saw you request a ride to the airport," he continued, "middle of the night, alone. That's when I knew it was happening now. So I made sure I was the driver who picked you up." "How?" I asked, the word coming out sharper than I intended. He didn't look proud. He looked exhausted. "I have ways, contacts. I use them." I sat back and stared at the dashboard clock as the seconds kept moving. My heart was still racing, but my mind had shifted into a different mode, the one that counts, measures, checks. If this was true, then the danger was outside the car, not inside it. If it was a lie, then the danger was sitting in the front seat. I watched him in the mirror. I watched his hands. I watched the way his eyes kept tracking the same dark angle near the concrete pillar. The clock changed again. 1 minute. I didn't speak. I simply waited, keeping my phone ready, my body quiet, my eyes fixed on the shadowed area outside. And then the air changed, first as a faint vibration, then as a growing sound coming from somewhere behind us. A siren, then another, and then a sharp flash of red and blue light hit the inside of the car, bouncing off the windows and the dashboard. I lifted my head, and my breath caught as 3 police cars came in fast from different directions, closing the space around us. The sound filled the space all at once. Sirens, doors opening, voices calling out directions I couldn't make out yet. I didn't move. My hands stayed in my lap. My phone rested face down where I'd put it. For a second I felt strangely calm, like my body had decided to wait and see what the facts were before reacting. James lifted both hands slowly off the steering wheel and held them where they could be seen. "Stay still," he said, not to me, but to the air. His voice had changed. It was steadier now. I turned my head toward the rear window. Behind the car, just past one of the concrete pillars, officers were moving fast. They weren't looking at us. They were focused on something in the shadows I hadn't been able to see before. A figure stepped out and then tried to run. It happened quickly after that. Someone shouted. An officer lunged. The figure went down hard against the pavement. Another officer was already there, pinning arms behind a back. A third bent down and reached into a jacket pocket. I pressed my lips together and watched. The officer stood up holding a syringe sealed in plastic and a dark cloth folded in half. Even from where I was sitting, I could see the damp spot on the fabric. My stomach turned cold. James reached down and unlocked the doors. The click was loud in the quiet car. He didn't turn around yet. He just said, "You're safe now." An officer tapped on his window. James rolled it down halfway. "Suspects in custody," the officer said. "You did good." James nodded once, like he was acknowledging a routine report, not something that had nearly ended my life. I opened the door slowly and stepped out. My legs felt unsteady, but I stayed upright. The night air hit my face, sharp and real. I leaned against the car for a moment, just feeling the cold metal through my jacket, reminding myself that I was here. An officer approached me and spoke gently, asking if I was hurt. I shook my head. My voice didn't want to work yet, so I didn't force it. A few steps away, the man on the ground was being lifted to his feet. He wore a ski mask that had been pulled up, revealing a blank, almost bored expression. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I looked at James. He had gotten out of the car and was standing nearby, shoulders finally lowered, like he'd been carrying weight for too long and had just set it down. "I'm sorry I scared you," he said quietly. "I couldn't tell you earlier. If you'd panicked and gotten out, there wouldn't have been time." I nodded. The logic was there now, clear and unpleasant. One of the officers asked me if I was willing to give a statement later. I said yes. Another asked if I knew the suspect. I said no. Then James spoke again, and this time his words shifted everything. "The person who ordered this," he said carefully, "is someone you know." I looked at him. "Who?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the front seat and picked up a small tablet. He hesitated, then held it out to me. "You should see this before I say anything," he said. I took it with both hands. The screen was already on. The first image loaded slowly. It was grainy, taken from a distance but clear enough. Richard, my husband. He was standing outside a cafe, his arm around a woman's waist. Her face was turned slightly toward the camera. I recognized her instantly. Ashley. I didn't say anything. I swiped. Another photo, them kissing, another. Them entering a hotel together, another. Them sitting close at an airport gate, suitcases at their feet. I kept swiping, my hands steady, even though something inside me had gone very still. The last image had a timestamp from earlier that night. Richard and Ashley at the international terminal. Not domestic, international. 2 large suitcases. No urgency in their posture. They weren't going to New York. I handed the tablet back without looking up. James waited a beat. "There's more," he said. He showed me documents next. Bank statements, my joint account, transfers I didn't recognize, moving out in steady amounts over months. Then an insurance policy, my name, his name, a coverage amount I had never agreed to. I stood there reading quietly, like I was reviewing a project brief, not the dismantling of my marriage. When I finally looked up, the airport lights felt harsher than before, brighter, less forgiving. "So the wallet," I said slowly. "That was bait." "Yes," James replied. "He counted on you." I reached into my purse and took out Richard's wallet. I opened it carefully, not because I expected something new, but because I needed to confirm one last thing for myself. Behind the cards, folded tight, was a document I had never seen before. A property transfer. My signature at the bottom. Perfect. Clean. Forged. I closed the wallet and held it for a moment. Then I put it back in my purse, zipped it shut, and took a breath. The police were still working behind us. Radios crackled. A stretcher rolled by, empty. Someone handed me a paper cup of water. I drank it slowly. James waited. He didn't rush me. He stood a few steps away, giving me space. Finally, I spoke. "Where are they now?" He checked his watch. "Boarding a flight to Paris, gate 12. I nodded once. Then I said, "I need to go home." He agreed immediately. "I'll take you." As we walked back toward the car, the sounds of the airport returned. The distant roar of planes, the hum of machinery, the low murmur of voices. Nothing else had changed. But I knew that when I lay down that morning, nothing in my life would be the same again. And I didn't sleep at all. When the sun came up, it didn't feel like morning. It felt like a pause. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee I didn't drink, watching light move slowly across the floor. The apartment looked the same. The couch cushions were still out of place from the night before. Richard's jacket still hung on the back of the chair. Nothing in the room reflected what I now knew. James had stayed nearby, not hovering, just present. He didn't talk much. He didn't need to. Around 7, my phone buzzed. A message from Richard. "Landed. Crazy night. Call me when you wake up." I put the phone face down and waited. At 9, he called. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey," I said, letting my voice stay soft and sleepy. "Honey," he replied, warm and familiar, too familiar. "I was worried you didn't answer last night." "I fell asleep early," I said. "Migraine." There was a brief silence. I imagined him recalibrating. "Oh," he said. "Are you okay?" "Yes. You forgot your wallet, by the way." Another pause, longer this time. "I managed," he said. "Everything's fine." Of course it was. We spoke for another minute. He talked about meetings. I listened. When we hung up, my hands were steady. That surprised me. Afterward, James sat across from me at the table. He slid a thin folder toward me. Inside were copies, bank transfers, dates, amounts, account numbers. Everything labeled. Everything calm and methodical. "This is what we do next," he said. "Step 1, silence. Don't confront him. Don't change your behavior. Step 2, secure your access. I've already spoken to a financial crimes attorney. Step 3, documentation. Everything goes through official channels. I nodded. The steps made sense. I liked steps. That afternoon I went to the bank. I asked for printed statements. I asked about freezes and flags. I asked questions I'd never asked before. No one looked surprised. They handed me papers. I signed where I needed to. Then I went home and waited. That night, Richard messaged again. "Miss you. We'll celebrate when I'm back." I typed, "I love you," and sent it. I put the phone face down, and I waited. The next 2 days passed quietly, almost politely. I kept my routines. I answered emails. I watered the plant by the window. I folded laundry that didn't need folding. When I left the apartment, I locked the door the way I always had, checking it once, then checking it again. Richard called once a day. His voice stayed light. He talked about delays, about meetings stretching longer than expected. He said Paris was exhausting. He said he couldn't wait to come home. I listened. I responded. I didn't correct him. James checked in every evening. Sometimes he came by and sat at the kitchen counter while I made tea. Other times he just called to confirm small things, appointments, paperwork, timelines. He never asked how I was feeling. He didn't need to. Everything he said was about process. On the third day, he brought another folder. "His accounts are frozen," he said, placing it gently on the table. Not all of them, but enough to get his attention later. I opened it and scanned the pages, legal language, dates, reference numbers. I didn't rush. I let my eyes move at a normal pace. "There's more," he added. The investigator traced the burner phone used to contact the man at the airport. It wasn't registered to him, but the payment trail is clean. Clean was good. That evening, Richard called again. His tone had shifted slightly. Not panic, curiosity. "I might stay a bit longer," he said. "Things are complicated here." "That's fine," I replied. "Take the time you need." Silence on the line, then a careful breath. "You sound calm," he said. "I'm just tired," I answered. Which was true. After we hung up, I stood at the sink and washed a single mug, even though it was already clean. Then I dried it. Then I put it back in the cabinet. The next morning, Brenda Miller called. Her voice was steady and precise. "I've reviewed everything James sent. This is solid. Very solid." "What happens now?" I asked. "We wait for him to return," she said. "If we move too soon, he stays abroad. If we wait, we control the timing." "How do we make him come back?" She paused, just long enough to be intentional. "We give him a reason." That afternoon I recorded a short video, nothing dramatic. Just me sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight on the wall behind me. I told Richard about a potential buyer, a property I'd inherited, a number big enough to matter. I smiled once. I didn't overdo it. I sent the video and set my phone down. Then I waited. He replied within 15 minutes. "I'm coming home," he wrote. I read the message twice. Then I closed the app, leaned back in my chair, and looked around the room. For the first time since that night, everything felt quiet in a different way. Ordered, controlled, and I waited. The day Richard was scheduled to land, I woke before my alarm. I didn't rush. I showered, dressed, and made the bed the way I always had, smoothing the corners until they lay flat. I ate a piece of toast standing at the counter, then rinsed the plate and set it in the rack. Ordinary motions, familiar order. James picked me up mid-morning. We didn't talk much on the drive. The city moved past the windows in its usual way, traffic lights, buses, people carrying coffee cups. It struck me how unchanged everything looked. At the airport, we didn't go to the arrivals hall. We went to a small observation room tucked behind tinted glass. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. 2 chairs, a narrow counter, a clock on the wall that ticked louder than it needed to. Brenda arrived a few minutes later with a slim briefcase. She nodded to me once. No small talk. "The agents are in position," she said. "Once he clears immigration, it will be immediate." I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap. Then I waited. Through the glass, I watched passengers begin to emerge, families hugging, people checking phones, a couple arguing quietly over a suitcase. Time passed in a steady, uneventful way. Then I saw him. Richard looked relaxed. He wore the gray suit I'd bought him for his birthday. He was smiling at his phone, probably typing a message to me. He moved with the confidence of someone who believed everything was under control. He stepped up to the immigration desk, handed over his passport. The officer scanned it. I saw the shift before anything else happened. A pause. The officer's posture changed. He said something into a radio. 2 agents approached from behind. Richard turned, confused, still smiling. One agent spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the effect. The smile disappeared. His shoulders stiffened. Another agent took his arm. That was when Richard started talking. Fast. His hands moved as if explanation alone could fix this. It couldn't. The handcuffs came out. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt a steady certainty, like watching a process complete itself. Richard tried to pull back once, not violently, just instinct. The agents guided him forward anyway. He looked around, eyes darting, searching for something that wasn't there, and then, without knowing why, he looked toward the glass. Our eyes met. I don't know if he truly saw me or if his mind filled in the space, but in that moment, his expression changed completely. The confusion gave way to understanding, real understanding, he knew. I stayed seated. I didn't move. James stood behind me. I felt his presence without turning around. Richard was led away, still talking, still trying. The agents didn't hurry. They didn't need to. When the door on the other side closed, the room went quiet again. Brenda checked her watch. "That part is done." I nodded. My hands were still folded. I noticed they weren't shaking. Later that afternoon, Brenda asked if I wanted to see him. "You don't have to," she said. "There's no legal requirement." "I want to," I replied. The meeting room was small and plain, a table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs on either side, a guard near the door. Richard was already there when I entered. He looked smaller without the suit, without the context he usually carried around him. His hands rested on the table, cuffed. When he saw me, his face broke. "I never meant—" he started. I sat down. I waited for him to finish. He didn't. "I know everything," I said calmly. "The accounts, the insurance, the property transfers, the man at the airport." He stared at me. His mouth opened, then closed. "Why?" I asked. Not loudly, not angrily, just the question, placed carefully between us. He looked down at his hands. "It was easier," he said finally. "You trusted me." I nodded once. "That's all," I said. I stood up. The guard opened the door. As I walked out, I didn't look back. Outside, the hallway felt brighter than it had earlier. James was waiting. Brenda joined us a moment later. "It's in motion now," she said. "The rest will take time. Paperwork, hearings, transfers." I exhaled slowly. "Okay," I said. And for the first time since that night in the car, I believed it. The weeks that followed moved slowly, the way official things always do. There were forms to sign, then confirmations that the forms had been received. There were calls scheduled days in advance and calls that came unexpectedly while I was in the grocery store or standing in line for coffee. Every conversation followed a pattern: names, dates, reference numbers, nothing emotional. I preferred it that way. Brenda handled most of it. She explained only what I needed to know, and she did it without commentary. This account is frozen. This transfer has been reversed. This document has been flagged as fraudulent. Each sentence stood on its own. James checked on me in the evenings. Sometimes we talked about logistics, sometimes we didn't talk at all. He would sit at the table while I cooked, reading something on his phone, and the quiet felt steady instead of empty. Richard's lawyer reached out once. Brenda responded. I never spoke to him directly again. A month after the arrest, I went back to the apartment for the last time. I didn't rush. I brought boxes and moved room by room, deciding what stayed and what didn't. Clothes went first, then books, then small things, receipts in drawers, spare keys, cables whose purpose I couldn't remember. I found our wedding album on a shelf in the closet. I opened it once, standing there, not sitting down. I looked at a few pages, then I closed it and placed it in a box labeled Documents. I cleaned the kitchen before I left, wiped the counters, took out the trash, left the place in order. When I handed in the keys, the leasing agent smiled and wished me luck. I thanked her and walked out. The new apartment was smaller, quieter. It faced a different direction, so the light came in softer in the mornings. The first night there, I made tea and drank it slowly, standing by the window, listening to traffic a few streets away. I slept through the night. The legal process continued. Richard took a plea. Ashley was arrested abroad months later and extradited. I didn't attend every hearing. I read transcripts instead. I learned the language of consequences without drama. The money came back gradually, not all at once, in pieces. Each return felt less like relief and more like correction. James stopped by one evening with takeout and sat across from me at the small table. Your dad would have liked this place, he said, looking around. I think so too, I replied. We ate quietly. Later, when he left, I washed the dishes and put them away. Then I sat on the couch and did nothing for a while. No phone, no paperwork, just stillness. There were moments when memories surfaced without warning. A sentence Richard had once said, a laugh I now recognized as rehearsed. I let those moments pass without engaging them. Time did what it always does when you let it. Eventually, the trial dates were set. Sentences were handed down, numbers were finalized. The system moved to its end. One afternoon, Brenda called and said, That's the last filing. I thanked her and hung up. That evening, I took out the folder James had given me months earlier, the first one. I removed the documents and placed them in a longer-term file. Then I recycled the folder. I stood by the kitchen counter for a moment after, hands resting on the edge. Then I made dinner, and I ate it at the table alone without rushing. A year passed before I noticed that my life felt quiet again in a way that didn't feel fragile, not empty, not tense, just settled. My days had a rhythm now. I woke up early, made coffee, checked the calendar, and worked from a small studio space I'd rented a few blocks from my apartment. The windows faced an alley where delivery trucks came and went. It wasn't beautiful, but it was steady. I liked that. James still called once a week. Sometimes he came by for dinner. He never asked questions that pushed. He talked about practical things, repairs, schedules, people he knew from my father's old world. Through him, my dad felt present again, not as a loss, but as a quiet influence. One afternoon, I received a letter from the court confirming the final asset recovery. I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer with the others. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. The numbers were correct. The names were correct. That was enough. Later that evening, I cleaned the kitchen. I wiped the counter. I rinsed a mug. I dried my hands on a towel that still smelled faintly of laundry soap. Outside, the sky was turning gray-blue, the way it does just before evening settles in. My phone buzzed. It was a message from a woman I didn't know. She'd found my contact through a legal referral James had given her. Her message was short and careful. She said she felt something was off in her marriage. Nothing dramatic. Just paperwork she didn't recognize. Questions that were never answered clearly. I read the message twice. Then I replied simply, "You're not imagining it. Let's talk." After I sent it, I put the phone face down. I made tea and sat at the small table by the window. Steam rose from the cup. A car passed outside. Somewhere someone laughed. Ordinary sounds. Safe sounds. That night, before bed, I stood for a moment in the hallway and looked around my apartment. Everything in it was chosen deliberately. Nothing belonged to a life I was pretending to live. I turned off the light and went to sleep without checking the door twice. In the morning, I woke, rested, and that's how I knew it was really over. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep sharing stories like this. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. We truly enjoy reading those. 2 popular stories will appear next, both about quiet moments that change everything.